Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I will invite everybody to you should have Sidurim in your chairs. I will invite you to turn to page 289. You will find the service of minha. אשרי יושבתך עוד יעללוך הסלש תהילה לדוד רממך לא היה מלך וברך שמך לעולם ועד גדול אדוני מהולל מאוד ולגדולתו אין חקר הדר כבוד הודיך ודברי נפלאותיך עשיך זכר רב טובך יביאו בצדקתך ירננו טוב אדוני לכל ורחמיו על כל מעשיו כבוד מלכותך יאמרו וגבורתך ידברו מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים וממשלתך בכל דור ודור הנה חולל לך יסבר ותנתן להם את אוכלם ביתו צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו וחסיד בכל מעשיו רצון יראיו יעשה ואת שבתם ישמע ויושיעם תהילת אדוני ידבר פי יברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד ואנחנו נברך יה מעתה ועד עולם הללויה. Please rise for Chatzi Kaddish on page 290, after which we'll continue with the Amidah. We'll start together and then we'll continue silently. After the Kedusha we'll be facing east for the Amidah, but first we'll do Chatzi Kaddish on page 290. יתגדל ויתקדש שמר הבא בעלמא דיברה כאילו תבמליך מלכותה בחייכון ובימכון ובחדי כל בית ישראל בעגלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהא שמר הבא מברך לעולם עולמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה בדרל שמת קודשה בריחו נעלמין כל ברכתה ושייתה תוש וכתה ונחמתה דמירם בעלמא ואמרו אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב אלוהי שרה אלוהי רבקה אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא אל עליון גומר חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גואל לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיים מתים אתה רב להושיע מוריד הטל מחלקל חיים בחסד מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומדומה לך מלך ממית ומחיים מצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה המתים. לקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו לעומתם ברוך יאמרו ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד עוד לך לא נצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. יתגדל ויתקדש שמר הבא, ויעלמה דברה כאילו תבמליך מלכותה וחייכון ובמכון ובחד כל בית ישראל, בקלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהא שמר הבא מבורך לעולם ולמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמד קודשה בריחו, לעלמים כל ברכתה ושירתה תוש וכתה ורחימתה דמירם בעלמה ואמרו אמן. תתקבל צרותיון ובאותיון לכל ישראל, קודם ובון וישמעי ואמרו אמן. יהא שלום הרבה ונשמעי וחיים עלינו על כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמן. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא שעונד השמיים ויוסד ארץ משה ויגרב השמיים על שינת ולא בלב. ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. Monos Kaddish on page 302. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ועלמה דברה קילותה וימליך מלכותה בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהא שמי רבה מברך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו, לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבה מנשמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן.
We invite everyone now to please rise as the Ark is opened and two Sifrei Torah are brought out. Sifrei Torah from the Shoah, one from Czechoslovakia and one from Germany.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
I invite you now to please be seated as the Torot are being seated. Miriam is unwrapping the Megillat Yom Hashoah with the names of members of this congregation that have been on notes for many, many years. Okay. And we'll invite all those who have brought names of loved ones, family members who perished in the Shoah to line up on this side of the room. If you don't have names yourself, you're welcome to line up also and read the name from the Megillah from members of this congregation.
So everyone who would like to read, please come online, and everybody who's been invited to read, come up as well.
My great-grandmother Sigmunda Friedmann, my great-aunt and uncle Else and Hermann Dirnbach and their son Hans Dirnbach, my great-aunt Henriette Rosenberg, the next group of names I only learned in the last year, her daughters Ilse Rosenberg, Hanna Rosenberg, and Lotte Bachmann, Lotte's husband Julius Bachmann, the twin daughter and son of Lotte and Julius, Reiche Bachmann and Jethro Bachmann, who were about 2 or 3 years old when they were killed. my great aunt and uncle Emma and Karl Marburger, my great aunt and uncle Paula and Jakob Bernhard, and 5 cousins who were adult siblings, none of whom married or had children. Lene Kaufmann, Max Kaufmann, Fritz Kaufmann, Adolf Kaufmann, and Willi Kaufmann, and the family of my late cousin Rudolf Kaufmann, his mother Regine Kaufmann-Keller, his stepfather Nathan Keller, and his sister Marianne Kaufmann.
If you think that I don't have the names in the scroll, please hand them to Nancy over here. And we'll put him.
My grandmother, Jenny Blumenthal Baumann, and my grandfather, Heinrich Baumann. My great-aunt Gertrude and great-uncle Sigmund Blumenthal, and their daughter Leni Blumenthal. All of these people, my relatives from Mosbach, Germany. And I want to say something in honor of my mother, who fled, survived, came to New York, and honorably made a good Jewish life for herself, and was a proud member of this congregation.
It's from my husband, Paul Klausner's family. Josef Yussel Kornfeld, my late father-in-law's first cousin, was the only survivor of his extended family. His parents were Shmuel and Scheindel Kornfeld. Yussel's wife, we don't know her name, she perished. Yussel's siblings were Yitzchak, Alexander, Yehezkel, Shlomo, Fegi, and Pesel, identical twins who perished at Auschwitz. Yitzchak, Alexander, Yehezkel, and Shlomo were married. Their spouses and children or names aren't known. They all perished. They were from Tarnów, Poland. Also from Tarnów, on his grandfather's side of the family, David, Sophie, Rose, Pepe, and Jakubowicz. Sophie was Paul's great-great-aunt.
The Braunberg family of Kazimierz, the Ackerman family of Lublin, the Label family, Moshe, Pesa, Sarah, Avram, Zeifman, and Menachem Friedman, Moshe Sigelowitz, Dora Chinitz Sigelowitz, Eli Bunya Henach Sigelowitz, Benjamin Kapelowitz, Ethel Jessen Kapelowitz, and their children Pinchas, Basya, and Miriam Kapelowitz. Alberto Cohen, Boria Danielle, David Castro, David Minzan, Zach Cohen, Isaac Tzalik, Jacob Ovadia, Jacob Albashari, Isaac Albashari.
From my father's family, Shaki, from Larissa, Greece, living in Salonika, Greece. His brother's son, Chaim Shaki, perished. He was the son of Abraham Shaki and Rahel Shabatai. And from the Al-Hanati family, from my grandmother, Rena Shaki, her sister, Rachel, her sister, Marika, her sister-in-law, Bida Nachmia, her brother Chaim, her brother Haskias, and not a direct relative, but one responsible for saving my cousin Irena, was Lillian Fernandez Diaz. And she was the sister of another cousin's mother, and she brought baby Irena to a convent in Salonika and saved my cousin. But the Fernandez Diaz family escaped to Italy and was slaughtered at Lago Maggiore by the Nazis when they were found by the Nazis. And the Modiano's family, my mother's family, the family of Menachem Modiano and the husband of Sarah Nechmias, Her brother, Lazar Modiano, living with the family in Yugoslavia, perished in Bergen-Belsen. And her father's sister, Joya Carasso, and their 3 children, Buena, Matilda, and another child, and her sister Ora's son, Raul, all perished.
My grandmother's sister, Rachel, for who I'm named.
My grandmother's sister, Leah, for who I'm named, and all the other family that we don't know yet.
Goldie Goldstein, Esther Kaplan, Aaron Kaplan, Avram Kaplan, David Kaplan, Hannah Kaplan, Rebecca Kaplan, Samuel Kaplan.
Solomon Krohn, Jetta Braun, Max Braun, Gitta Braun, Isaac Braun, Julius Braun, Joanna Goldschmidt, Irma Gumpert, Berthold Gumpert, Elsa Hattenbach, Rosa Hattenbach, Michael Hattenbach, Joseph Hattenbach, Siegfried Hattenbach.
Louis Kander, Selma Krohn, Gustav Krohn, Johanna Levy, Herta Levy, Levi Levy, Selma Reese, Herman Reese, Rosa Rosenfelder, Fanny Rosenfelder, Joseph Rosenfelder, Samuel Rosenfelder, Bertha Rothschild, Millie Schwan, Siegfried Selling, Therese Selling, Netchen Stern, Bella Wazenek.
My father's mother, my grandmother Ruth Sucking, my father's sister Miriam Sucking, my aunt. Shel Chaim Fleischer, Rivka Fleischer, Leah Fleischer, Basha Reisel Fleischer, Hannah Fleischer, Israel Chaya Goldberg, Hinda Miriam Goldberg Yurkevich, Moshe Simcha Goldberg, Havala Goldberg, Hannah Belia Goldberg, Favel Blunder, Sarah Blunder, David Blunder, Shalom Blunder, Itka Blunder, Abraham Blunder.
Members of my family who perished in the Shoah: my maternal grandfather Adolf Grungold, my uncle Samuel Grungold, my paternal grandfather Louis Nutzbaum, and my paternal grandmother Margaret Nutzbaum. I also remember my grandmother Ethel Greengold, my mother Julia Nelson, and my father George Nelson, who survived the Shoah. Bahar Joseph Cohn, Joseph Bahar Cohn, Jacob Bahar Cohn, Vital Bahar Cohn, Moher Azhan, Yosef Hezhal, Albert Hazhal, Esther Hassan Cohen, Regina Cohen Hassan, Linda Jacob Eliyahu, Visa Moher Aboher.
The family of David Reicher, Greta Reicher, Fanny Reicher, Miriam Reicher, Shmuel Reicher, Adolf Reicher, Max Reicher, 5 sisters, Mary Reicher, Sally Reicher, Regina Reicher, Rose Reicher, Lotte Reicher, the family of Sabina Reicher, Hiel Hollander, Sophie Hollander, Jacob Hollander, Seema Hollander, Frumetta Hollander, Devorah and Joseph Telushkin,
my husband's family from Prague, Joseph Bora, Kamila Winter Bora, Greta Bora Chapek, Rex Bora Krell, Hugo Strusler, Ernestine Bora Strusler, Max Cohn, Sarah Bora Cohn, Heine Cohn, Leon Bora, Wolf Bora, Rivka Bora, Sabine Strich, Abraham Strich, Willie Rutschik, Hella Strick Rutschik and daughter, Tina Broner, Zuckerman, Joseph Broner, Hugo Pick, Mitzi Reiner Pick, Hanush Pick, and my family from Vilnius, and we assume they died in Ponar. Yanko Meir Vuker, Esther Vuker with her husband, Archik Lazarov and 2 children, Golda Vuker, Berda Vuker, Hanan Vuker, Betzalel Vuker, and Sima Vuker, and Shlomo Vuker, who died as a soldier in the Red Army, and Yanko Meyer and his second wife, Libba.
I was a child during the Second World War. All I remember is that packages my mother sent to her family in Poland and Hungary came back, addressee unknown. And one after another, we knew they died. I don't know their names. The family names were Friedman and Halpern. Chaya Kurtz, Moshe Kurtz, Pinchas Kurtz, Gittel Kurtz, Minna Kurtz, Yaakov Kurtz, Brandel Wasserstein, Alicia Wasserstein, Joseph Wasserstein.
Jacob Pardo, Abraham Pardo, Gertrude Hartog, Davidson Pardo, Marianne Oppenheimer Pardo, Hector Solomon Carrido, Alexandra Carrido, Esther Carrido Pato, George Pato, Luis Crix, Etta Strauss, Alice Strauss Van Benny, Sonia Van Benny, Vita Van Benny, Willem Van Benny, Mr. and Mrs. Woolley Culp.
My paternal grandparents, Helen and Leopold Friedlich, my aunt, Ruchel Steinberg, and my grandfather's siblings in the Steinberg family, Shmuel and Malya, and their children Enya, Ruchze, Einach, Rezel, and Frede. Shlema and Sura, and their children Benzion and Chassia. Enya and David, and their children Piero, Pesia, and Boira. Benjamin and Chaya Piero, and their children Libe, Tzivia, Einach, Leke, and the youngest, whose name we don't remember. On my mother's side, the Git family, Meir and Nechama, and their children Ruchel, Noach, and Sura. Zisia and Malka, and their children Zelig, Simcha, Zalman, and Itzakel. Chaim and Leke, and their children Bela and Pesia. Label and Maram Leah, and their children Zalman and Itzik.
My maternal great-grandmother and namesake Bashalea and her husband Simon Rossman from Lemberg, Poland, and their children Yassel, Kayla, and Shandel, all lost in the Holocaust.
I'll start with my father, who is a survivor of Auschwitz. Never talked about it. The only names I know are my paternal grandparents, Herschel Furman and Rachel Jazanowski Furman. My father arrived in Auschwitz in 1943 with his wife and child. I don't know their names or anybody else in the family, and they were gassed. He survived. On my mother's side, a lot easier because my aunt talked a lot. My great-grandparents, Yitzhak Rembachowski, Chana Goldberg Rembachowski from Yenjiev. They had seven children. Abba Rembachowski, Beinish Rembachowski, Roisa Rembachowski, Rachel Rembachowski, and then Scheindel Rembachowski, who married somebody named Vevel. I don't know the last name yet, but they owned a dairy farm in Nuglovitz, a huge dairy farm, and I know them and their 3 kids. Hinda, Fagel, and Rachelka were all shot when the Nazis arrived. The oldest was my grandfather, Moshe Rembachowski, my grandmother, Golda Vertal Rembachowski. The only ones who survived was my mother and my aunt. The rest all perished. Rachela Rembachowski, Paula Rembachowski, Vevel Rembachowski. My great-uncles who survived, his wife and child perished, Regina Rembachowski and Freja Rembachowski.
My mother's parents, Sarah and David Rosenrath, and her brother. My father's mother, Risha Vogelman, his brother David and sister Devorah, and their families. And my father's first wife and their children. And my parents who survived, Helen Rosenrath Vogelman and Mechel Vogelman, and my aunt Gala and her husband Nachum. Yitzchak Nadowitz, Sarah Nadowitz, Chulek Hirschtal, Manya Hirschtal, Yakiva Nadowitz, Berish Nadowitz, Brindle Nadowitz, Hanka Nadowitz, Shimon Nadowitz, Salo Dokowitz, Haskell Borowitz, Shlomo Vizman, Devorah Vizman, Itcho Vizman, Shlomik Kirschenbaum, a sister Vizman.
On my father's side, from Baranovich, Avshalom Mishkin, Elisheva Mishkin, Nachum Mishkin, and Rosa Mishkin. On my mother's side, from Kovna, Yitzhak Rubin, Hadassah Rubin, Aaron Rubin, Esther Rubin, Rina Rubin, my first cousin, age 9, Moshe Rubin, Elchanan Rubin, Yechezkel Rubin, and David Rubin.
The family of my mother, Gidel Katz, the entire family. Miriam Gittler, Svedny, Alexander Zisha Svedny, Hannah Svedny, Liana Svedny, Aya Svedny, Jakel Svedny, Moshe Waldman, Melko Waldman, Baruch Waldman, Jacob Waldman, Ira Waldman, Hevra Waldman, Riva Chananaski, David Friedhandler, Fege Friedhandler, Chaim Feldhandler, Joseph Feldhandler, Leon Feldhandler.
My great-grandparents, Clara and Arya Lieb Stoyer.
Nachum Stoyer, Ruchel Stoyer, Alexander Stoyer, Max Stoyer, Sarah Tepper, Shlomo Tepper, Dora Tepper, Anna Tepper, Liba Fahn, Bernard Raymer, Batir Fahn, Mordechai Smuck, Sabine Smuck, excuse me, and the family of Alandra Sue, who was here at BJ 2 months ago with Miriam and me. His family was instrumental to the survival of my family. Marcus Dressou, Louis Dressou, Judith Dressou, Leendert Dressou, Moses Dressou, Neeltje Dressou Cohen Delara, Josephina Dressou van Prague, Elizabeth Dressou, Barbara Painha Dressou, Elizabeth Rubens Dressou, Eliezer Van Houten.
My family members who were killed in Kovna and Mariumpol in Lithuania. My grandfather Shraga Leib Kotler, my grandmother Shifra Kotler, my aunt Sarah Kotler, members of the Yoel family, members of the Elyashkevitz family, Julius Ludvinovsky, and other members of the Ludvinovsky family. I also want to remember my parents who are no longer alive. My father, Solomon Eliash, who survived Dachau, and my mother, Leah Eliash, who survived the Kovna ghetto.
The Chenowich, from Chenowich, Poland, Shlomo Puria, age 56, and his sons, Chaim Piura, Shmuel Piura, Isaac Yosef Piura, Ephraim, all shot November 18th, 1942, Herschel Piura, deported to Treblinka at age 35, his wife Rachel, age 35, and their daughter Mincha, age 12. These are all the names of the families of my wife, Maria, and also some names from my family as well. Those from Balpotek, Slovakia. Rosalia Grunwald, deported to Sobibor, May 22nd, 1942, age 64, and her children, Alexander Grunwald, age 36. Adolf Grunwald, age 34. Morik Grunwald, age 28, who escaped Retrovik concentration camp October 1942 and survived the war, hiding on a farm in Zegna, Slovakia. Jolana Grunwald, Bert Grunwald, her sister Sally Steiner, and her brothers Abraham, 62, and Samuel Steiner. Rebecca Steiner, age 54. Ladislav Friedman, age 29. Armin Friedman, age 27. Rosalia Friedman, age 53. Those from Hunkovich, Slovakia. Desider Zuckerman, his wife Sidonia, and their children. Alex, age 14. Irene, age 16. Armin, Jano, Peter, age 1. From Frankfurt, Germany. These are from my family line. Georgina Mayer, age 76. Her sister Betty Jane, age 77. Her son Walter, age 51. His wife Freda, their son Kurt, and her brothers Jacob Julius, age 82, who disappeared.
This is from my father's family,
Yankala Karaonik, Helena Bobo Karaonik, his brothers and wife, and sister Rochala Karaonik, Meislish, Hershka Meislish, Volker Meislish, Esther Karaonik, Shimon Karaonik, Dinya Karaonik, Fradele Karaonik Seif, Avrom Seif, Mindik Seif, Willi Seif, David Sierzek, Cecil Schwarzappel Seufer, Shimon Seufer, Yasha Seufer, Genya Seufer, Misha Berry, Yossele Seufer. Vega, from my mother's family, Vega Berry Kramarsh, Maurice Kramarsh, Scheindele Kramarsh, Ruchele Kramarsh, Avarasha Berry, Bella Goldschmidt, Salman Goldschmidt, Vera Goldschmidt, Ruzia Goldschmidt Pfeffer, Zlote Schwarzappel Rosin, Chaim Rosin, Shimon Rosin, Leib Rosin, Hannah Baratz, and Veva Baratz.
My grandfather, Leib Nakimovsky, had 6 brothers. They all lived in the city of Dwinsk with their families, children. They all perished. I don't know their names. My grandfather never spoke to me about them.
Isaac and Hannah Friedman, Solomon Friedman, Rachmel Friedman, Frieda Friedman, Ferdinand Cohn, Carol Luft, Simon Luft, Iktar Luft, Vaja Luft. Family of Isaac Geld. His aunt Fega Privner, his uncles Chaim, Moshe, Yankel, Yosel, Yidel, Herschel, Yonah, Olgeld. Family of Joe Merrow, his mother Bertha Marmelstein, his father Herman Marmelstein, his sister Sarah Marmelstein.
Our family lost approximately 23 people in the Holocaust. My father was able to get, in the very early years of the Nazi regime, to get about 11 people out of Germany, people who had emigrated over the years. However, when I was about 6 years old, I received a letter from Dorka Mailman from Poland. She said that she was writing to me because we are both named after the same grandmother, Dorka and Doris from Devorah. She would like to make the trip to visit me. This was before the Holocaust began. She would like to visit me in a few years. She'll be old enough, maybe not quite old enough, so maybe in 4 years. She never came. I kept waiting for her, and the relatives from Germany, which were most old boys. I don't know all these people's names, only Dorka Mailman, and the people in Germany who stayed here. But the people from Poland, I don't know their names. And I kept waiting, and they were all boys from Germany, and I kept waiting for this girl to come. Waiting. And after the war, my father was in England looking for people who may have survived, and he did find one family by getting to England early and waiting there. And then he found somebody who did some research on Dorka. mailman that I'm now talking about, and he discovered that she had traveled just when she said she would, not to New York. She traveled to Auschwitz, and there she was killed.
My mother's parents, her brother and her two sisters, whose family name was Wassermann, her husband and child, whose family name was Zakowicz, were murdered. My father and his father survived. They fled Poland but passed through Soviet concentration camps.
My brother, Marshall Kurtz, at 3.5. My great-grandmother, Chaya Stein, at 82. My grandfather, Pinchas Kurtz, at 63. My grandmother, Gitel Schoenberg Kurtz, at 67. My aunt, Brindel Kurtz Wasserstrom, at 37. Akiva Wasserstrom, I don't know his age, and Yosef Wasserstrom, his husband, and Yosef Wasserstrom, my cousin, at 7. My aunts, Riva Sternlich Boner, Edel Sternlicht Rosenberg, my grandmother, Mindel Sternlicht, my grandfather, Pinchas Kappel Sternlicht, my cousin, Esther Rosenberg, cousin Yitzchak Boner, and Yaakov Boner. Okay. Family of Rose Alden. Herman Poliner, Sarah Poliner, Fanny Poliner, Paula Sola Alabrunner, Yaakov, Dina Poliner, Selina Yosef Apfusser.
My parents, David and Sarna, were married in Warsaw in 1939, just 3 months before the Nazi invasion. As soon as they realized what was happening, they determined to escape. That's a long story, which I won't go into. But my mother never saw her family again. She lost her father, Pinchas Pinkel, her mother Miriam Pinkel, her brother Kuba, Yaakov, called Kuba, her sister Fela, and her brother Henyek. However, she did have cousins who survived. They managed to go to Israel in the 20s and 30s, and I visit their children to this day. My father's family was from Demblin, and he had 7 siblings. 4 of his parents and his 4 siblings perished. My mother's family, by the way, died in the ghetto and in Treblinka. My father's family was Issachar Weichmann, Chava Weichmann, Eli Weichmann, Hannah Weichmann, whom I am named after, Esther Weichmann, and Itzhak Weichmann. My father had 2 surviving brothers, Yaakov, who emigrated to Australia after the war, and Matis, who emigrated to Israel after the war. Okay, do you want me to read it? Okay. Hermina Wiener, Pepitza Wiener, Zosha Graf, Zanika Graf, Dutzika, and her parents.
My mother's father's mother's mother, Miriam Gabler, and her 9 children, Yankel Gabler, Shimon Gabler, Sarah Gabler, Raisel Gabler, Lieb Gabler, Chaim Gabler, Shlomo Gabler, Dahlia Gabler, and David Gabler, shot in the woods of Nowy Dwór, Poland.
Also, my father's mother, my paternal grandmother, was involved in an organization called Beit El. It was similar to Hashomer Hatzair, and was involved in the women's movement, and afterwards in '52 she worked with the Polish Army and Jewish refugees with the Joint. My mother's father, he was not shot with his wife, his children. He went to Auschwitz and died in 1943. And on the other side of the family, the Lopatin family, there was Friedel and Schendel, and they had a lot of children who died. We don't know their names. Okay. Family of Paul and Jerry Heller, Miss Kolk and so from Hungary, Holocaust victims, Ilana Heller, Clara Heller, Paul Grossman, Josephine Grossman, Rosie Grossman, Andor Grossman, Bella Grossman, Judith Grossman, Sandor Grossman, Imre Lowinger, Piroshka Grossman, and the survivors, Miklos Heller, Imre Heller, Magda Grossman Heller, Elizabeth Bosi Grossman Bornstein.
Rachela Rębiczowska, Pola. Pola. I can't see. Shumlech. Golda Ita. Moshe Aaron. Itzhak Abba. Linush. Moshe, Regina, Freya, Shandel, Roisa, Menachem, Vigil O Butchervitor, Hannah O Baruch Baram, Hannah and Shlomo Vertol, Herza Vertol, Shandel and Vivel Rębiszowska, Hinda Rębiszowska, Weigel and Rachela. Sarah Leah Dombrowski, Harav Chaim Aharon Dov, Etel Dombrowski, Aria Dombrowski, Sienna Safira, Yadel Dombrowski, Shesala Dombrowski, Tobiah Kaplansky, Yaakov Kaplansky, Etel Tonkilaman, Moshe Tonkilaman, Zosha Shinwald, Mendel Shinwald, Yitzchak Shinwald, Raven Safira, Rachel Safira, Yitzchak Safira.
my grandfather's parents, Ben-Sion and Doba Horenstein.
Henry Weinman's family, Lemel Weinman, Rivka Weinman.
Heinrich and Jenny Baumann.
Zippet Shapira, Yehuda Slomki and children, Pinchas Sapir and his wife and children, David Mishkovsky, Lieb Mishkovsky, Mindel Mishkovsky, Shana Midlarsky, Leibel Midlarsky, Zanvil Midlarsky,
Shevha Midlavsky, Rivka Midlavsky.
Shmuel and Malya and their children, Anye, Ruchse, Henoch, Ratzel, and Freda.
Shlemech and Shura, and their children, Ben-Zion and Chasia.
Anya and Duvid and their children, Pearl, Pesia, and Devorah.
Benjamin and Cheyenne Pearl and their children, Yuya, Tzivia, Henoch, and Laken.
And youngest whose name we don't remember.
Mayach Nechama.
On my mother's side, my great-grandmother's parents and great-grandfather's sisters, brothers, and parents. My great-grandparents were survivors. My grandfather on my dad's side was able to move out of Poland before the Holocaust. My grandmother escaped Iraq to Jerusalem in 1941.
My grandmother, Sarah Finkelstein, Rita Finkelstein, and Carl Finkelstein survived Auschwitz, and my grandfather, my grandfather on my mother's side, Mendel Weinberg, survived Dachau. They met in a displaced persons camp and had my aunt in Germany and my mother on the way over.
Mother of Nechama, children, Rugel, Noyach, and Surin. Ziz, Zeshe, and Malke. Children, Zelaya, Zimche, Zalman, and Ezekiel. Charm and Laika. Children, Bela and Pesha. Leibel and Marem, Laya. Children, Zalman and Itzik. Rukel Steinberg, Friedrich family. Helen and Leopold Friedrich.
Razel's shorts.
Schwartz, Julia Schwartz, Tulia Schwartz, Yitzchak Zorg, Kalman Lovey, what's that? Chaim Mordechai Lovey, Avraham Lovey, Leopold Gutman, Anna Gutman, Zvi Gutman, Malka Gutman. Can you make that out? Okay, Malka Ray and most of her children, Chayon Shlomo Engelstein, Pinchas Weinfeld, and brothers Yerchem, Moshe Hirsch, and his mother Chana Fega.
Samuel Gilla, Chaya Rock, Moshe Rock, Bluma Rock, Hutchkey Rock, Paula Rock. My great-great-grandparents on my grandfather's side, Zvi and Sarah Eckes, and 2 of their 6 children, Chaim and Pearl Eckes, as well as Chaim's wife, were all sent to Treblinka.
Leslie Hyman, sister-in-laws, grandparents, and aunts and uncles, all perished in Auschwitz. Chaim Hershkowitz, Raquel Hershkowitz, Pinchas Hershkowitz, Shmuel Hershkowitz, Avram Hershkowitz, Leah Hershkowitz, Shlomo Hershkowitz, Wolf Hershkowitz.
The family of my grandmother, Mary Eisenberg from Pinsk and Rudetz, Poland, killed in mass executions 1941 and 42. Bela Weissman, Pesia Weissman, Chashke Weissman, Ethel Lieberman, Yaakov Lieberman, Avraham Lieberman, Miriam Lieberman, her husband and daughter Shulamit, Sonia Lieberman, Asher Lieberman. Emma Schnabel, Matilda Schnabel, Erna Stumpf, Ernestine Fisher.
My mother's family all perished. Her parents and my grandparents, Chaim and Chaya Wertheimer. Her sisters, Dina, Gita, and Chava. And her brother, Moshe. She's the only one who survived. She was a Zionist who made it to what was their Palestine a year before the war started. And on my father's side, in Brody, Poland, the Hack family. Thank you. Do you want me to read any names? Claire Rubin, studying Rachel Poser, Charlotte Poser. Anyone else? The whole thing. Claire Rubin, Albert Rubin, Tony Poser, Sian Poser, Armand Poser, again Rachel Poser and Charlotte Poser. Anna Goldstick, Shimon Goldstick, and Mendel Goldstick.
On my father's side of the family, my great-uncles Hirsch and Menashe Korn, Reuven Mordko Miller, Shana Korn, Israel Korn, Chaim and Yitzhak Zeif, Etel Korn, Yehuda San, Chaim and Rachel Fuchs and their 8 children. And on my mother's side, Baruch Morosovich, David Morosovich, Fegela Morosovich, Isaac Morosovich, Haya Berman and her husband, Dora and Simcha Rosenwasser and daughter Halinka, Israel Morisovich, Mendel and Emily Morisovich, Rabbi Moshe Greengrass, Haya Greengrass, Israel and Rachel Greengrass and their 2 children, Sarah Libby Greengrass and daughter Rachel, age 2.5, Haya and Baruch Morisovich and son Alexander, who were killed in the Bialystok ghetto in 1942, Sarah Greengrass and her husband, Israel Greengrass's wife and 2 children, Maya Greengrass, Slava Greengrass and her unborn child, Yaakov and Edgar Greengrass and 2 children, Sarah, age 10, and Avraham, age 7, who were burned in a synagogue in Rosilov, Poland, David Label, his wife Haya Greengrass and their children, Fagel, Libby, and Herschel, Chaim and Bluma Bialystotsky, Simcha David Rothbard, Shmuel and Yaakov Rothbard in Vilna, Alta Sirler Gedolia, and Yitzhak Morris, Miriam Zolandas, Chaya Frida, Fagel Liba, and Chana Nagorka, and of the Lichtenstein family, Chaya, Dora Dwera, Yaakov Moshe, Avraham Israel, and Shmuel, Israel and Malka Goldman, and Malka Frockman.
Thank you. Abraham Park of Amsterdam, killed in Sobibor. David Park of Rotterdam, killed in Auschwitz. Emmanuel Hartog Park of Amsterdam, killed in Auschwitz. Emmanuel Joseph Park of Rotterdam, killed in Auschwitz. Hartog Park of Amsterdam, killed in Auschwitz. Hartog Joseph Park of Rotterdam, killed in Auschwitz. Sarah Park of Rotterdam, killed in Auschwitz. Ellie Park Bamberger, 17 years old, killed in Auschwitz.
From Chmelnik, Poland. My grandmother's 6 siblings and their families. Chana Minzemacher and her husband Moshe Yaroslav and their children Rivka, Vega, Yosef, Rachel and David, her sister Sprinza Minzemacher, her daughter Rivka and Mindel, her brother Yosef, well, her brother Yosef's wife, Shendel, and their 7 children, Sarah, Pola, Chana, Devorah, Avram Yaakov, Chaim Natan, and Shmuel. Her brother Chaim Minzemacher and his wife Chana Shmulevitz, and their 6 children, Yisrael Lieb and his wife Eva Kluska, and their child, very young child, Simcha, Natan, Yitzhak, Avram Yaakov, Rivka, Chaya, Mindel. That was my mother's family. My father's family came from Celts, and his brother Velvel, Shmuel Harsh, and his 3 daughters. Unfortunately, I don't know their names. His sister Chana Rochla, and their families. his cousin Chaim Shmulevitz and his wife Blima and four of their children, his cousin Baruch Shmulevitz and his cousin Moshe Shmulevitz. Unfortunately, I don't know their children. Family of Judy Geller Marla, Rivka Baila Lampo, and her 7 children. Alicia Gillis, Cecilia Gillis.
My father's family. My father survived 5 years of slave labor and madhousing, and then came to this country. This is just his immediate family. He lost uncles and their family. But his father, Moshe Davidovich, who I am named after, and his mother, Miriam Davidovich, his father died on the train to Auschwitz, and I know this because my first cousin was on the train with him, and he was dead. And he was dead before he got there. He was 94 years old. And his wife Miriam was murdered on arrival to Auschwitz. Their children were Yosef Davidovich and his wife Chaya. They were murdered by bullets in Kamenetz Podolsk in August 1941 with their 2 children, Chaim, age 4, and Hinda, age 12. Their son Tzvi survived the massacre by jumping off a bridge, and he then survived Auschwitz and went to Israel, fought in the War of Independence in the Haganah in 1948. My father's brother, Meir Davidovich, and his wife Kyla. Meir died on a death march after Auschwitz. His wife was murdered on arrival to Auschwitz. They had a daughter, Renee, who was 5 or 6. She was murdered on arrival. They had 2 children, Elvi and Hedy, who were 13 or 14 years old. They both survived Auschwitz. One of them is still alive now, who lives in LA. Hersh Davidovich was murdered with his wife, Rosa, and their child, who was age 2. I do not know her name. Mordechai Davidovich. Sarah Davidovich, his sister, who was murdered on arrival to Auschwitz, with her son Elia, who was 11, and Manhart, who was age 10. Their daughter Fritzi survived Auschwitz. She moved to Chicago. She was in Skokie when the neo-Nazis marched on Skokie, and then started speaking about the Holocaust at that time.
In 1944, Auschwitz, the town of Gishgerish, which included my grandmother, aunts, cousins, and other family, Ava Klein, Clara Klein, Rachel Klein, Edith Klein, Salamovitz, and her unborn child, Hermina and Jenner Kraus Tzvi, their son, Lenke Udun, Yisrael Vina and their children, and many others. I survived because my mother passed for Christian, and I was a hidden child.
My aunts, Adela, Paula, and Basha Zygmunt, my great-grandparents, Zvi and Sarah Zygmunt, and many more uncles, aunts, and cousins who perished in Belzec, Poland. Imre Davidovitz from Moldova, Hungary. Ingrid Mandel from Humin, Slovakia, and in memory of my grandfather and great-uncles, Samuel, Zevek, and Harry Zygmunt, survivors of Buchenwald and Emenze.
Frumke, Guberski, Leah Waxler, Mendel Leib Waxler, Sore Waxler Levine, Perker Waxler, Itke Waxler, Chaya Glazer Guberski, Hanke Guberski Batke, Yanko Batken, Chaimke Batken, Sorke Batken, Fumke Guberski Yoel, David Yoel, Aaron Velvel Yoel, Shleim Gubertsky, Tante Grunke, Ethel Glazer Kanterovich, Sil Glazer, Rivke Horowitz, Rain Shepsel, Kazel Rogovsky, Kitke Rogovsky, Meshke Lapuk, Tzemach Rosenberg, Hirschke Kreskin, Hirschke Schmidt, Yankel, Merke van Ushminie, and Dr. Gorfain.
So my maternal grandmother, Tamala Steinbertz, had 8 children, 2 survived. My uncle Eli Finkelstein and his wife Savach Sherman, and my first cousins Henrik and Ephron Finkelstein, Beryl Finkelstein and Nadja, and my first cousins Chanala and a second daughter. Regina Finkelstein and husband Yassel Fleischer and their children Fela and another girl named Unknown. Favel Finkelstein and wife Malkola Shrenner and children Henrik and Sala Finkelstein. Devorah Finkelstein and her husband Laser Hanselman and their children Isaac and Hannah. And they had another child, Rose, who did survive. They live in Canada now. And Zelik Finkelstein. And then my grandmother had 9 siblings, 7 perished with their families. You can. Later.
So this is Tamala, my great-grandmother. She had 9 siblings, 7 of whom perished with their families, and many cousins and children. Toba Rosenberg and Simcha Arbus, Brondel and Milach Arbus, and their 2 sons, Joel and Moshe Stern, and their children, Chela, Israel, Bernie, Eva, and Itki, Strulik Rosenberg, Yitzchak, and Yidis Rosenberg. Gittel Sternblitz and her husband Chaim, and their children Label, Sarah, Rachel, and her husband Chaim Fleischer. Moshe Sternblitz and his wife Dobala Sternblitz, and their children Mordechai and his wife Genya, and their children Shalom, Leah, Edney, Orna, and Ruthie. Simcha and Yitzchak Rosenberg and Paula Sternblitz.
Our great uncle Shmuel Zawel Sternblitz and his wife Devorah Arbus. Our great aunt Rivka Sternblitz and Abraham Yitzchak Perlmutter. Their children Sarah, her 2 husbands, and children Moshe, Rivka, Yoshua, and Paula. Their daughter-in-law Nechama and their children Ricky and Chaya, and their spouses whose names we don't know. Additional children, Paltiel, his wife Bluma, and 3 children whose names we don't know. 3 children, Yitzchak, Chaim, and Tammy, their respective spouses, and Sevilla Perlmutter. Our great-great-uncle Itzla Sternblitz and his wife Friedel, their daughter Paula, and her husband, and 2 girls whose names are unknown. Our great-great-uncle Hirsch Sternblitz and wife Ida, their 3 children, Raymond, Charlie, and Arnold. Rachel Sternbutz, Louis Tuller, his wife, and one son.
On my maternal grandmother, on my mother's side, we just know about my grandfather's brother, Hanan, and his children, Yankel, Leibo, Rulacha, Hanoa, and Zlaito. And then there's some siblings, Moshe Eli and his wife, Selma, Brandel, and Itchy Finkelstein. Unfortunately, we don't have very much information on my father's side. We thought it was a small family. However, we subsequently discovered on a trip to Lublin in 2017 that we were missing many of my maternal grandparents' siblings, and that there was a total of 22 in all. I had asked permission to digress a little to share with you how the people of Lublin, where all this occurred, where my family lived, are trying not to forget what happened during the Shoah. There's a very famous gate in Lublin called the Gratska Gate, and it has offices and it houses the Gratska Gate Theater Company. And this theater company realized that there was a very strong Jewish heritage that they wanted to discover and preserve. So they created folders for 40,000 of the Jews that no longer live there, and they asked that people identify family members born in Lublin and tell a little bit about them and add them to the folder. And in 2017, they held the 700th anniversary of the establishment of the city of Lublin. Now, there are no Jews in Lublin. And that's where my family lived, and they invited Jews from around the world with a connection to Lublin to join in the celebration. And over 30 of my family who did survive flew to Lublin to visit our heritage. And we came from Canada and France and Israel and the United States. We had 2 survivors. One of those was the one I mentioned before, my first cousin, who's in her 80s. And another aunt. There was 9 grandchildren and 2 great-great-grandchildren. It was unbelievable. I mean, we saw the house my mother lived in, the bakery my father owns. We took a bus to the village outside of Lublin to visit the country, where everyone used to go and get out of the city. We visited Treblinka, Medenik, and Belzec. We had a big family dinner where we each identified a family member matching who we were named after. And we showed family photos, and we told stories, and we attempted to bring the past closer to the present. In ending, I just wanted to recognize my parents, Bella and Jacob Teller, both now passed, who survived the war. They were in a work camp in Siberia, and my mom died on Yom Hashoah in 2012. So, sure,
So I was just going to add very quickly, as my mom said, we visited the hometown of Lublin, Poland, and several concentration camps, and retracing the steps of my grandparents and our relatives. And most of our family, the names that we read, were killed at Majdanek, which we visited. And unlike other camps in Nazi-occupied Europe, Majdanek is not in a remote rural location away from population centers. It's actually within the boundaries of Lublin, which is a relatively large city. And today, it's surrounded by apartment buildings, homes. People go about their day passing right by, walking their dog, jogging, driving, seemingly oblivious to what's standing right in front of them. And even further shocking is that Majdanek is one of the best preserved concentration camps of the Shoah. The camp was captured nearly intact because of the rapid and unexpected advance of the Soviet army in 1944, which prevented the SS from destroying any of the camp infrastructure. And after the camp takeover, the Soviets protected the camp area and convened a special Polish Soviet commission to investigate and document the crimes against humanity that were committed there. And this effort was one of the first attempts to document the Nazi war crimes in Eastern Europe. And today, it's all there. We walked through the barracks, we stood inside the large gas chamber, we walked into the crematorium with dozens of ovens. We saw one barrack filled with hundreds of thousands of shoes. There was a mausoleum that was erected in 1969, and that contains a massive mound of all the ashes and remains of the cremated victims, which was collected after the liberation of the camp in 1944. And seeing all of that made it feel so real, and we couldn't help but look for the shoes of our family members and imagine what it was like for them actually standing there.
my mother's father and his 6 brothers and sisters and their parents, Meir and Rachel Strachilevich of Kishinev, Moldova, and of Kilia, Moldova, left and moved to Petach Tikva. However, the 2 brothers and 2 sisters of Meir Strachilevich in Kishinev remained and were later murdered by the Nazis. And my grandfather was informed of this in Petach Tikva and told my mother, who described it to me. Gitta Lipman. Lema Lipman.
Feivel Lieb Kotzler, Shifra Shula Kotzler, Sarah Kotzler, Shika and Pinchas Eliashkevitz, and other family members, Julius Liudvinovsky and other family members, David Yoel and other family members.
This year seems harder than the other years. I think we all know why. So my grandpa, my beloved grandpa, who I was fortunate to have for 40 years of my life, lost his whole family in the Holocaust. His mother, Sultana Tzvi, everyone is a Tzvi family. His brother had died a few years before the war, but his brother's wife, Signora, died in the Holocaust. Their 2 children, Jacques and Simtov. My grandpa's brother, Solomon, who was his favorite brother, I understand, and his wife, Lucia. Their son, Albert, their daughter, Gentile, their son, Albert, and then it was my grandpa's sister, Gentile Tzvi. She married Jacob Cohn, and their 2 daughters, Lucia, Victoria, their son, Obadiah. They all perished in Auschwitz. And my grandpa's youngest brother, Saltiel Tzvi, also was killed in the Holocaust. They are all from Salonika.
I have 32 names. Far too many names, far too many people. All family members from Slovakia who perished in Auschwitz. The Cohn family, on my father's side, 21 died, including Lajos, my grandfather, in whose name the Holocaust scroll from Slovakia, which was dedicated in his name here at BJ some 20 years ago. The Davidovich family, 4 perished. The Vig family, 2. Wolstein, 3. On my mother's side, the Wolitzers, 2, including Malvin, my grandmother. Far too many names, far too many people. All the names we have heard here tonight. For me, it's important to remember that with all this death, there's also life. Later this evening, I will call my mum in Sydney, Australia. She just had a party to celebrate her 103rd birthday. 103. And I will tell her about all the names that we read out here tonight, including our family. And she will be very, very pleased.
My grandmother, Sarah Korngrun, who was taken from Vienna to Fort 9 in Lithuania and killed in a massacre with 5,000 other Viennese Jews. My grandfather, Rudolf Korngrun, murdered in Auschwitz. My great-grandmother, Rivka Goldberg. And then my great-uncles and aunts, Fischl Goldberg, his wife and children, Ruchel Goldberg, her husband and children, Nathan Goldberg, wife and children, Michael Goldberg, wife and children, Etka and Max Schmergel, my great-grandmother Ruchel Korngrun, who was killed in a massacre in 1941 in Tarnopol, Poland, Gusta Korngrun and family, Ronia Korngrun and family, Zina Korngrun and family, Helena Honigsberg and Linda Honigsberg, who were murdered in Theresienstadt. Linda was 6 years old. Alfred Kohn and family, deported from Vienna. All of this part of the family is deported from Vienna. Max Kohn and family, Moritz Kohn and family, Olga Kohn and family, Fanny Kohn and family, Emma Kohn and family, Selma Kohn and family.
And from Sklata, Poland, Moshe Niesenbaum, Kalman Niesenbaum, Motel Niesenbaum, Victor Niesenbaum, Ruja Niesenbaum, Sima Elfenbein, Luja Elfenbein, Yisrael Elfenbein, Kalman Elfenbein, Yannick Elfenbein, Don Wolfovich. From Königsberg, members of the Flomenbaum family. From Stashov, members of the Gilman family, the Altwerker family, the Berger family.
From Romania, our grandfather Andrei Blum's family, Joseph Blum, our great-grandfather, and my namesake, Mariska Blum, our grandfather's sister, 24 years old, and our mother Miriam's namesake, and 45 other members of our grandfather's family.
My grandmother's brother, Latsko Theodore Weil, he was 12 years old, from Slovakia. My grandmother's grandfather, Alfred White, and my grandmother's grandmother, Ernestina Gross, 60 years old and 65 years old.
From Hungary, Irma Weiss, Desho Fahidi, Gilike Fahidi, who's 11 years old, Pali Weiss, Natalia Weiss, Emre Weiss, Rosika Fahidi, Surenka Fahidi, and Tony Fahidi.
My grandfather, Shmuel Zalman Greener, his twin brother, Chaim Hinak Greener, their brother, Israel David Greener, and their brother, Moshe Greener, his children, Ber Chaim Greener and Fraser Greener, and my great-grandparents, Lippman Greener and Merla Perla Wurzbicka, my grandmother's 3 siblings, Joseph, Pinchas, and Estera Firestein.
I grew up in Israel, and we didn't know anything about my father's family. They didn't want the children to be sad, so we didn't know any stories. Only when my older sister went to the camps, she interviewed my father, and he told her the story that in 1932, my grandfather was very Orthodox, and it's not next year in Jerusalem, it's this year in Jerusalem. So they came from Mezrich by boat to Haifa. They had to give their passports. They lived in Mea Shearim. And his mother really suffered. It was really hard for her. She went back to Poland and perished with her whole family. And 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to do an art exhibition in Krakow, and we hired a researcher, and he found my grandfather's passport in an archive, and I used it for my art exhibition, the pages from the passport.
Thank you. My father left Poland when he was 3 with his immediate family from Lashitz, but his aunts, all 3 of them, the Robel sisters, were killed, and their husbands and their children. On my father's wife's family, the Goldenfein family, Chaim Goldenfein's first
wife and young son were killed in Bergen-Belsen. My mother's grandmother, Rivka Kroman, Meshka and Chana Kroman, that's on her mother's side. On her father's side, my great-uncle Zacharia Dubiecki, great-aunt Sivia Dubiecki, their two sons, Sholik, I don't know the other one's name. After my great-uncle Mordechai Dubiecki. After the war, my mother's family, who survived, moved to Paris to find what they hoped would be their last living relative, and found that Leah Dubiecki Branwyn and her two children, Joseph Branwyn 10, Roger Branwyn 3, had been deported to Drancy and then to Auschwitz. And my son Benjamin and my other son Zachary dedicated their bar mitzvahs to these two boys who did not have them.
Both of my parents are originally from Vilna, Lithuania, and my grandmother Esther and grandfather Yaakov Hayat, my uncle Baruch, my aunt Chaya, Sarah, their spouses, and many cousins. I don't know their names. My grandfather on my dad's father, Haskell, and my grandmother Zelda Rudnick, their daughter Razel, and they're all murdered in Ponar in a forest outside of Vilna.
My mother's family from Lvov, the Reichmans, and the Goshes families, from Nerol, the Schneider and Altman families, and from Lipsko, the Goshes siblings of my grandmother, it's been a long line, 9 of her siblings and 2 of my grandfather's siblings from Nerol. And my mom is here and she's a survivor.
On my mother's side, her family came from a town in Poland near Warsaw. There were a few towns. One was Łódzki, Girardov, and Ashminov, and of her paternal grandfather, he came to Argentina, but part of the family perished in the war. Their names are Rochel and Yom Tov Witskitsky, Tova and Yehiel Meir Grutska and their children, Liba and Simcha Liegenberg and their children, and their youngest son, Yosel, with his wife and a child. And then my mother's maternal grandfather, Yehiel Fislevich, he was the only one that we know exactly that he died in Warsaw. All the other ones, we believe that he died either in Warsaw or in Treblinka. Abraham Fislevich and his family, Ische Fislevich and his family, Shmiel Fislevich and his family.
My father's brother Hillel Abramovich, his sister Lena, and her 2 children, Lena Abramovich, and also Anne Frank, the artist Felix Nussbaum, the resistor Malazimet Baum, the writer Irene Nemirovsky, the poet and artist Max Jacob, Yitzhak Katzenelson, the poet, Charlotte Salomon, Hannah Senesh. Good evening, everyone. We will now conclude the reading of the names. I also invite you to look at the exhibits, the children's exhibits that are scattered around. And we will unfurl the scroll while the candles are being lit.
So we ask our survivors, children or grandchildren of survivors to come forward as we light the memorial candles. Please rise. We'll stay standing for a moment of silence.
רחמים, שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמות כל אחינו בני ישראל, אנשים, נשים וטף, שנטבחו ושנחנקו ושנשרפו ושנהרגו, וגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. אנא בעל רחמים, הסתירם בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם, ונאמר Amen.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant for perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the souls of all our brethren, men, women, and children of the house of Israel, who were slaughtered and suffocated and burned to ashes. May their memory endure, inspiring truth and loyalty in our lives. May their souls thus be bound up in the bond of life. May they rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Mourners Kaddish. Yitzgadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah, v'amad yivrach v'yurteh v'yamlich malchuteh, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, b'gala u'bizman kariv v'yimru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah barach le'olam omei amaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei l'kudesha b'richu. Le'ela mikol berchata v'shirata, tush berchata v'nechamata, damiran b'ama v'yamru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shamaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamru amen. Oseh shalom b'rumav, u'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'yamru amen. The Sifrei Torah are now returned to the ark.
Please be seated. It's my privilege to introduce our guest speaker this evening, Dr. Bernd Wollschlaeger. Dr. Wollschlaeger travels the country sharing the experience of his life, beginning with his struggles growing up in Germany in the shadow of his father, who he would learn to be a highly decorated tank commander and Nazi officer. As he will share, Dr. Wollschlaeger became estranged from his father upon learning the truth of the Nazis and all that they had done, and embarked on a spiritual journey, ultimately converting to Judaism, making Aliyah, immigrating to Israel, and serving in the IDF as a medical officer. Dr. Wollschlaeger is a published author. He was featured in the 2012 documentary Ghosts of the Third Reich, and he's producing a new documentary on the Israeli-Palestinian coexistence. When he's not speaking to communities, he lives in Miami, where he has a private practice as a family physician. But Dr. Wollschlaeger, we're so grateful that you're here with us this evening. Welcome.
It's intimidating, surrounded by microphones, okay. Maybe I can disintimidate it. Thank you very much for inviting me. Can everybody hear me? Can I do it with one microphone or two? But anyway, I will arrange it. As the good rabbi already told you the story, I'm now ready for question and answers. Well, too easy, I won't get out of it. But anytime I speak on a Yom HaShoah about my life, I feel it's inappropriate for me to stand here, because I'm not a son of a survivor. I'm the son of a murderer. So how on earth can I be part of the Yom HaShoah? And it took me a long time to internalize that, even after my conversion, and trying to live with that. And I chose not to talk about it until my children asked questions. My son was first, and then my daughter Jade, who's here. They asked big, simple questions. And one of the questions I well remember, specifically from my son's side, was, Daddy, who is my grandfather? Now, it's a little bit difficult to explain it to a Jewish child that's going to Jewish schools, as a Jewish family, that her grandfather, my father, was a highly decorated World War II German tank commander and convinced National Socialist, and sucked up the ideology with the mother's blood, not with the milk. And on the other hand, her father, mine yours truly, is Jewish and Israeli and served in the Israel Defense Forces as a medical officer and was combat qualified. So how on earth come these two worlds together? And what I try to explain my children over the years, and more or less, that's what I'm trying to condense in a presentation to you. I was born on May the 9th, 1958 in Germany, 13 years and 1 day after the surrender of Germany on the 8th of May 1945. And I grew up in a beautiful town called Bamberg. Bamberg, anybody ever been in Germany? I'm not a representative of the tourism industry, but I highly recommend specifically that area because it's where I was born. It's a town called Bamberg, which is a historic city, 1,000 years old. And it's a living, breathing museum, never touched by any wars, literally pristine, and a time machine. And you literally walk through the different time zones, and you can appreciate history beginning 1,000 years ago. So as children, we grew up in school to appreciate history. Who lived where? Bamberg is the modeled after Rome. The only Pope buried outside Rome is buried in Bamberg. And so we could rattle it down as children. But I noticed that one thing was a little bit out of the norm, out of order. There was a time, not past, fairly recent past, where a war took place, and we knew that as children, that there was a war. Why? Because we had about 15,000 American soldiers and family members stationed in a city of 75,000, and as a child I figured out in the war people lose and people win, so we obviously didn't win that one because there are foreign soldiers there. So that's what I knew, but nobody talked about the war. Nobody. And when I asked my parents about my grandparents, I was told they're gone because of the war. So the war, tremendous impact on German society to the point that nobody talked about, neither in the society nor at home. But slowly but surely, my father and then my mother started to tell me about their history and my respected family history. And when my father started to talk, he never stopped talking. He talked with me specifically on Sunday afternoons when he took me out for long walks in the forest. He was an outdoor person, a hunter. He taught me how to handle a rifle, how to shoot. We had a very, very close relationship. And he told me over and over and over again the same story, that he was the youngest tank commander in the German army, serving in an elite unit of the German army under the command of General Guderian, the father of the German Blitzkrieg. And on every battlefront that Germany opened from September the 1st, 1939, my father's tanks rolled into Poland. This literally the first tanks to roll in. Then the following year, the attack on France and the Benelux, meaning Netherlands and Belgium, my father's tanks were the first to roll in. And then, of course, the massive attack on the former Soviet Union in the summer of 1941, Operation Barbarossa. My father's tanks were not only the first to roll in, they pushed towards Moscow in a tremendous speed and conquered a strategically located town on the way towards Moscow, which the Germans never reached, called Orel. And for that accomplishment, he was awarded the Knight's Cross by a man whom he still adoringly referred to as his Führer, Adolf Hitler. Now, I had no idea who Adolf Hitler was, but I had an idea that my father was the knight in shining armor. As a little boy, a munchkin of 8, 9 years old, that's what I believed. And the fact that my father was a hero was reinforced by his old war buddies who came to our house at least once a year to celebrate the good old times, the war. And they referred to my father as Arturo, his first name was Arthur, our hero. You should be proud about your father. So what is expected for me? To be proud of my father, blindly. On the other hand, my mother didn't tell me the story of glory. She told me the story of horror. She was an ethnic German, a Sudeten German, born and raised in Czechoslovakia along the border to Germany. There was a territory in West Czechoslovakia that literally was inhabited only by Germans for hundreds of years, and they were called the Sudeten German because this area was called Sudetenland. And my mother grew up in a very wealthy merchant family. My maternal grandfather was a wealthy merchant, and they could afford to live in a beautiful villa that they built, and had to leave everything behind when the Russians attacked and died subsequently from the stress from the escape. And my mother barely made it to West Germany, and everything lost. So the war is glory from my father's side, the war is horror from my mother's side. Now, there was something else unique that happened, and I don't even know how it happened or what higher power intervened there.
My father and my mother rented an apartment in a big building from a landlady who lived upstairs. This building is still standing, by the way. And my mother always told me never to address the landlady who lived alone in this huge apartment upstairs. It's one of those massive patrician-style 19th century building, together with her maids, and I should only speak to her when spoken to. And in the hallway, right next to the massive wooden stairway leading upstairs to the landlady's apartment, was a large portrait of a man mounted on the wall, a painting, an officer, a German officer in uniform with the officer's insignia on the shoulders, the officer's hat or cap, and then the knight's cross around the neck, but with different facial features that my father had. He looked identical like my father. So he was not my father, and when I asked my father who this man was or what is the man's name who depicted on the portrait, my father looked at me and said sternly, he was a traitor, ein Verräter, and I should not ask questions about him. The traitor that my father referred to was a portrait of Count Klaus von Stauffenberg, the German colonel who on July the 20th, 1944, tried to assassinate Adolf Hitler, which unfortunately failed. He was executed with dozens of his fellow compatriots, and his widow, Nina von Stauffenberg, lived upstairs. And not only that, when she had grandchildren, she had several children, multiple grandchildren, whenever they came into the house, there was a big brouhaha, and I sneaked upstairs to try to play to them, which I did too. And I experienced in this house a wonderful family, beautiful family, and all the walls of her apartment were covered with pictures of him, Count Klaus von Stauffenberg, her husband, and her. So I asked myself as a child, how can it be a bad man when he was so compassionate to his children that even everybody talked about him still? So this was the number one enigma that I had, because my parents didn't talk about it. And in school, I was about 12 years, 13 years max. We started to talk about recent German history in a very sanitized version that was as follows. Adolf Hitler rose to power in 1933. In January 1933, he was appointed as a democratically elected leader of a party, appointed by Hindenburg and by the President of Germany and by Pape and the Chancellor of Germany. And rapidly he rose, not only took the power as a chancellor in a democratically elected government, but introduced all his goons into government. And within 6 months, a dictatorship was spreading all over Germany. Hundreds of thousands of people disappeared in concentration camps that didn't agree. Hitler started the Second World War. 60, 70, 80 million people died. Among them, 6 million Jews as collateral damage of war. And then on the 8th of May 1945, Germany surrendered, and huff and puff, like the Huns that invaded Germany, they disappeared, and we started to continue living our life. Well, that was, of course, concentrated horse manure. That was not the truth. I didn't know the truth because nobody talked about the truth until an event happened in Germany that changed everything for me and for Germany too. The Olympics in 1972. And that was the first time that West Germany, because we are divided in communist East Germany and or democratic West Germany, when West Germany hosted the Olympics for the first time, after Hitler abused the previous Olympics in 1936 in Berlin as literally as propaganda material, this was now the new Germany, a democratic Germany, a Germany which for the first time had a chancellor in power in 1969 who was not tainted by the past. His name was Willy Brandt, who rose to power in 1969. He was a victim of the Nazis and not perpetuating the Nazi system, which actually his predecessor did. His predecessor, Kurt Georg Kiesinger, the chancellor from 1966 to 1969, West German chancellor, was a Nazi. Not only was he a member of the Nazi party, but he also was working in a senior position in the propaganda ministry of the Nazi party in Berlin. And Willy Brandt rose to power in 1969. In a landslide election, his party, the Social Democratic Party, was the major party in Germany, and he became the chancellor. And one of his first acts as prime minister or chancellor was in December 1970 to travel to Poland. And in front of the Warsaw Ghetto Memorial, he sank on his knees, bowed his head, and asked for forgiveness for what Germany did. And that was unheard of, unseen of, and for my father, that was Verrat, treason. I remember My father, he always read newspapers with me at home in order to educate me. He was a brilliant man, very intelligent and very well read. But at that moment, he was furious. He slammed the newspaper on the breakfast table, pointed with the finger to the picture where the chancellor knelt in front of the memorial, yelling and screaming, "Schau mal her, Bernd, wieder ein Verräter. Look, Bernd, again a traitor." Now, it was a little bit uncomfortable for me because I was raised by my mother, an Orthodox Catholic, in a Catholic faith. My father was a Protestant. He called himself an atheist, but he was a Protestant. And so my mother sent me to Catholic kindergarten, Catholic elementary school, to the church to be an altar boy. She wanted me to become a priest. Well, that didn't obviously work out well. That was not my choice. But from my background, and as an Orthodox Catholic like my mother, that was a positive sign that somebody kneels in front of a memorial. Why is my father so mad? And then came the Olympics in 1972, which featured our chancellor, our democratically elected chancellor, Willy Brandt, opening the Olympics to great fanfare. He had this enormous moral standing in the world. And I remember we got our first TV, black and white though, and my parents invited friends over. There was wine, beer, food. It was a joyous moment, and everybody was clapping their hands, and the teams paraded into the stadium in the opening ceremony. And suddenly one team paraded into the stadium carrying a flag with a star inside. And at that moment, nobody said a word. It was the do not ask a question moment. And I said, that's weird. I had no idea what that flag meant, but it was like any other team. Why the adults react so funny? I had no idea what that meant. It was another team. And then on the 5th of September 1972, almost a week after the opening of the Olympic Games, the catastrophe happened. The same team that paraded so proudly into the stadium was brutally attacked by a group of Palestinian terrorists from the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, an elite unit of the PLO. And they attacked the Olympic Village, which has a very lax security detail there, climbed over the fence, attacked the Israelis in the apartments at night, butchered 2 of them brutally, and the remainder were taken hostage. And the next day, the Olympics continued. The president of the Olympic Committee, Braunitsch, who was a Nazi sympathizer, who already was the president of the Olympic Committee during Hitler times, refused to stop the Olympics. The German government stopped it. And deeply embarrassed that Jews were killed and their blood shed on German soil, they dispatched highest ranking member of the German government, among them the Minister of Interior, Genscher, to negotiate face-to-face with the terrorist leader. This iconic picture where he negotiates face-to-face with the Issa, who had shoe polish in his face, darkened his face and had a hat on. Issa actually had a very interesting biography. I'm not 100% sure if it's true, but several sources have told me, and I read about that he was a child of a Jewish mother born in Beirut to a Christian father. But the ultimate irony, it was the head of the terror commander of the PLO. The terrorists demanded that the Germans would provide a Boeing 707 of the German army to fly them out to an air base outside Cairo, and then the Israelis should release Arab hostages, terrorists out of prisons, about 260, 280, and exchange should take place in front of live cameras. The German government consented, and the same night 2 helicopters landed on the Olympic Village. The terrorists boarded with the victims, the hostages, the helicopter, and everything on live TV. I can remember every moment of it. And they took off and landed behind the closed gates of the military airport called Fürstenfeldbruck. And then all hell broke loose. Firefight, nobody knew what happened. We only knew that the helicopters landed behind the closed gates. Suddenly firefight, explosions, night sky lit by explosions, then again firefight, and then followed by deafening silence. And an American journalist broke the news. They're all gone. What happened when the helicopter landed? Issa inspected the Boeing 707, which was empty, no pilots, they left, they fled, and he knew that's a trap. The German police opened fire against the, not orders, but against the advice of the Mossad unit and Sayeret Mankal units on the ground, together with the head of the Mossad. They told them, please do not attack, these are elite soldiers. Unfortunately, they didn't listen. And in that massacre, everybody died. In the end, one terrorist threw a hand grenade in the helicopter, which exploded and all Israelis perished in a fireball. The other helicopter, they sprayed with machine gun fire and everybody died. And the next day, that picture, that changed the directions of my life at all, totally. 2 helicopters on the tarmac, 1 helicopter burned out with the charred remains of the Israelis inside. The other helicopter, with the bodies of the Israelis slumped over the seats, partially covered by blood-stained linen, and above the pictures written, Jews killed in Germany again. Of course in German, and I understand and speak fluent German, but I didn't understand again. In the context, it meant that it happened again, it meant it happened before. And I was a little bit confused. And I asked my father, what does it mean? And my father yelled again, not again with them. Look what they do to us again. The victims is a perpetrator, the perpetrator of the victims. Look what the Jews do to us again. And I was stunned because I didn't expect such a reaction from my father and was confused. And specifically in school, we started to talk about the real history of the Third Reich. And our teachers, in the absence of a Holocaust curriculum, just to remind you, term Holocaust was coined actually more in like 1978, 1979, with the TV series The Holocaust with Meryl Streep. I don't know if you still remember. There are some YouTube clips definitely available. That's when the term Holocaust was coined. We didn't know what Holocaust meant, but our teacher tried to describe their own experiences. Some cried, some broke down. And for the first time I heard the term Auschwitz, Birkenau, the final solution, the murder of 6 million in the name of Germany, not by a rogue operation of the German army, a systematic effort to wipe out entire people, condoned, ordered, and executed by the legitimately elected German government. And that was hard to understand, because I'm German, so I'm guilty. And I asked myself, my father, the war hero, battle on every war front, maybe he knows some more and I can listen to him. I had the fear, maybe even he did something. But I was optimistic enough to ask him questions. And I came home I remember that night when I came home and I asked my father, he asked me, what did you learn in school? And I told him, like, we learned about the Holocaust. What did you know about it? He looked at me and said, Bernd, your teachers are communists. It's all a lie. Never happened. Don't listen to them. So I was caught between a rock and a hard place. Who is right and who is wrong? I believed my teachers. They were honest. But I also believed my father, and I feared my father, and I respected my father. By the way, my father I feared because I could never touch him, could never hug him, could never say daddy, could never kiss him, because of his weakness. He wanted me to be raised in the name of a strong, emotionless German fighter. Ein Krieger, he called that. So I asked him anyway, and he said, it's a lie. So my teachers tell me a lie, and my father tells me a lie, or one tells me truth and one tells me a lie. So I started to read ferociously whatever I could find in the library. That was before Google, Schmoogle, and all that stuff, believe me. And I started to read in English, in French, in German, in whatever was written. And the more I read, I had this sinking feeling my father didn't tell me the truth. And I decided to ask him. Now, there was a problem, of course. My father wouldn't talk, but there was another problem, or an opportunity for me. He was a raging alcoholic. So as a child of an alcoholic parent, I figured out there are 3 phases during the day. Phase 1, he's looking for a drink in the late afternoon. He's restless, irritable, and discontent. Phase 3, he's drunk in La La Land. Or phase 2, when he was a little bit chicker, the chicker zone I called it, not at that time. And you could manipulate him, and I could talk to him, could get money out of him. In that zone, I struck. And asked him questions. And the answers came out in 3 phases. Paraphrase it as follows. He told me in our first conversation, Bernd, what allegedly happened during the war with the Jews, allegedly happened, we didn't do it. We, the Wehrmacht, it was all the SS. Now that was a blatant lie that I knew already that was a blatant lie, because the lady upstairs, Nina von Stauffenberg, told me stories. I asked her questions. She was very willing to converse. That her husband, a colonel, badly wounded in Africa in 1940, 1941, was assigned to the Chief of Staff Office of the German Army, was responsible for the supplies of German troops on the Eastern Front, and he never figured out that there's not enough train capacity, even though there should be, until he figured out what they did with the trains. the transport of Jews to concentration camps. And even though he was not a philo-Semitic, maybe even a tip religious anti-Semitic, is Catholic, he considered it as wrong and shared that with his wife. So ranking officers had to know, including my father. About 25 years after his death, I found out actually the truth that my father lied in pictures and documents. A military historian provided me with a picture of my father sitting next to Heinrich Himmler in 1942 in the East. When a ranking German officer, he was a lieutenant colonel, my father, and together with the head of the beast, the SS, Heinrich Himmler, sitting together. It was not about military tactic. It was about how the army could secure an area around the kill zone, and the SS moved in and murdered and killed, mass murder. And he knew. Secondly, I found out a letter signed by my father to transfer several hundred Russian prisoners of war to a place called Auschwitz to neutralize them. It's a very sanitizing version of killing. He knew exactly, and his personal assistant traveled with the train to Auschwitz and to deliver the goods. He knew exactly what Auschwitz meant, exactly, even though he was not there. And then the third evidence was about 3.5, 4 years ago when I spoke for the first time after almost 20 years in my hometown, Bamberg, mostly attended by non-Jews, the presentations that I gave. The same military historian whom I hired to do some further research approached me and said, I found something that I got from the family of your father's late tank mechanic. And he came back from the East with a memento. I said, what memento? What do you mean? He showed me a metal attaché suitcase and said, there's something in there, you need to figure it out yourself. I don't know what to tell you. And I opened it up, and inside were torn pieces of Torah scrolls. I have it actually still at home and figuring out to what museum I want to donate it to. And asked him, what does it mean? He said, well, the best I could figure out that when your father's troops and your father raided Jewish villages, killed and burned everybody and everything, they tore out of the synagogue the Torah scrolls, soaked them in cold water or warm water, cut them in pieces, and this moist, wet parchment was an ideal insulation material for the German tanks in the cold Russian winter. So he knew exactly what he was doing. So my father was a murderer and a liar. Going back to phase 2, when I asked him questions, he told me, look, when Jews were killed, they were partisans. And partisans, or terrorists we call them nowadays, they're not belonging to the same army, so according to the Geneva Convention, we could kill them. There's always a justification to kill civilians. I told him, look, there's one thing I don't understand, and I don't expect an answer from you. How 1 million children that were murdered in the concentration camps, baby ripped from the mother's arms alive and thrown into burning pits, children who were gassed in Auschwitz, their bodies burned, their ashes scattered on the killing fields. You tell me they fought you? Doesn't make any sense. So don't even try to explain it to me. And then one evening he was blasted. And he had this moment of truth and said, if you want to know, you guys are all too soft. What we did was for the good of the world. We cleaned up all the dreck, the schmutz, the dirt. We talked about people, the vermin. We killed them all. And the world should give us the Nobel Prize. Why everybody's against us? He believed that that was right. So that was the last straw that broke the camel's back of trust that I had with my father. I didn't look up to him. I looked down to him. I didn't want to be associated with him. I didn't talk with him. But I had the burning desire to know what was the truth and why did it happen. Because I was German. That was part of me. I was the first generation. And I approached one of my teachers, a former Jesuit priest, and who was a very nice man. He was our teacher in philosophy and religion. I said, Bernd, it's a tough thing that we have to live with, and you have to live with, but I know the only way that we can deal with it is to make amends. Not to forget, but that we at least can make amends to those who were harmed. And I told him, look, what do you mean by Jews? I don't know Jews. The only thing I knew about Jews was that they killed Jesus in Sunday's class, and that they killed our Jesus. That's all. I didn't believe it, but that's all what we were told as children. I said, well, let me introduce you to an opportunity. I belong to a group of Catholics who invites over, in the name of the Catholic Church in Germany, Jews and Arabs from Israel to come together in Germany in a seminar. We always invite 1 or 2 Germans, and you would be a suitable partner. So the next seminar will happen in 2 or 3 weeks from now. And so I came to that seminar meeting for the first time in a pristine environment. It was in the River Rhine in one of these castles. It was beautiful. Meeting young Israelis, Jews and Arabs alike. They were about 18, I was 19, going to 20. And when young people meet, the last thing that you want to do is to find out what separates you. The first thing that you want to do is to find out what unites you. And what food you like, what music you like. I like the Israeli girls a lot, I have to admit. So I was not only driven by spiritual needs. Well, that's a PG-rated event, so we don't want to go further. But one of the girls, she said, look, if you like me, tacheles, I'm going to the army and you can visit. I cannot leave the country, but you can come to visit and talk to my parents. I said, absolutely. I was a big Schwitzer. I'm doing this. There was only one tiny problem. I had no passport. I had no money, and it was very difficult and expensive to fly. So I found a way to do it. After a month or 2 of doing summer jobs, I hitchhiked, and tell your children to close their ears. They shouldn't do that. I hitchhiked to Munich, and from Munich I crossed the Alps by train, arrived in Ancona, and that's a port city in Italy, in the Adriatic Sea, and then shipped by ferry, sleeping on the deck, not a cruise, to Israel. It was 4 days, 3 nights. And we reprovisioned in Piraeus, and again, that was before Google, Schmoogle, and Facebook. Can you imagine? We did it without it. And I sent her a telex that I would arrive in that time, and that place in the next 48 hours. And we arrived in Haifa, and I remember setting foot on Israeli ground. I was petrified, because what happens if somebody would recognize my name? That was a fear, justifiable fear, I think. But all these doubts were wiped away when I saw her, and she embraced me after I went to the customs, and she said, look, let's go to our parents' house. And I didn't know how to react. I was just happy to see her again. We took a shirut, that's communal taxi, and drove up to Neve Sha'anan in Haifa, in working class environment at that time. And her parents waited outside their apartment. They literally received me with open arms. Her father, burly, strong man, working in the port of Haifa. Her mother, a woman who worked in the kitchen of a big hotel. Very simple people, wonderful people. That he took my rucksack off my shoulder, walked me into the house, insisted that I should stay there. They've actually freed a room in the small apartment. They all moved in one room. They freed a room that I should stay there. And in the evening, they dished hummus, falafel, trina, whatever they could find, and forth, and were eating and chit-chatting in Yiddish, and I had no idea what they were talking about. Until her father looked at me and said in halting but clear German, if you want to speak German, Bernd, I can still speak German too. And I asked him, how? And he looked at me, rolled up the sleeve of his forearm, showed me the number tattooed, and said, ich war in den Lagern. I was in the camps. And in Auschwitz, I survived too. I stayed in Germany in a displaced person camp for 3 years. And afterwards, I transferred to Israel. And I had to learn that not all Germans were monsters. But I want to know one thing. Do they teach you about what happened? I said, I don't think enough. And he looked at me, then I will teach you. And 2 days later, he took me to Yad Vashem in Yerushalayim, the Holocaust Memorial, and literally took me by his hand and walked me through the entire exhibit. And that was enough. I mean, I broke down in the end. I could not digest that. That was too much to even understand. I knew it was true. But how can it be that people like my father murdered 6 million plus Jews, and these victims of this mass murder, the survivor, at least he didn't consider me as an animal, and not as an enemy and not as a murderer, but hosted me in his home. How can they recover? How did they rebuild their personal life, their professional lives, an old country anew? There's something unique about them, the Jews. I want to learn. And on my way back to Germany, I pondered the question, how can I find out more about Jews? And I knew I had to meet Jews in Germany, but the problem was there were only about 25,000 Jews left in Germany at that time, in a society of 60 million. And in top of it, in the mid-70s, it was the height of the Palestinian terrorism in Germany, the Libyan underground Libyan terrorists acting in Berlin, and the bombing of the disco that triggered the war between the United States and Libya. It was hell on earth. And Jews were hiding, literally hiding in the small communities in Frankfurt, Berlin, and Munich. But I found a small community in my hometown, literally accessible only through the backyard. There was this building, looking like a building that I was living in Bamberg, and behind there was this glass door that you had to go through, and there was a sign listed on the door, Israelitische Kultusgemeinde, Israelite cultural community, not even Jewish community. And I knocked at that glass door, and an old man opened the door, looked at me suspiciously and asked me, was willst du? What do you want? And I must have said something that made him feel comfortable to open the door, and said, come in. So I followed this old man through a very dark corridor, covered with granite plates, and on each granite plate there were names listed, and then in the corner there was a light, a red light. I had no idea what that meant. So I asked him, what is that? He said, what do you mean? This light. Oh, that's the Ner Tamid, eternal light. What are these names? These are the names of Bamberg Jews who never returned from Theresienstadt. Almost all perished, 1,500. And he walked me into his office. It was a hot day, no air condition, no fan, windows closed, curtain drawn. And he was very, very pale and had these white short-sleeved shirts on and the number tattooed on his arm. And I stared at it. And he looked at it. My name is Itzhak Rosenberg. I'm the chair of the Jewish community. Das ist Auschwitz. What do you want? It was very tough. I said, I want to learn. What do you mean learning? I get German students that come to me, but what do you mean by learning? I give you a book and you bring it back, I trust you. No, I don't. I learned all about the books. I read all the books, but I wanted to do something. I said, do something. I'll help you. I said, young man, nothing in life is free. If I want me to teach you, you need to work for me. Do you know what a Shabbos Goy is? I had no idea what Shabbos Goy meant, but it sounded like a good idea to get into a community. I said, sure, I do that. What do I have to do? Come on 6:30 on Friday and I'll show you what to do. I was there at 6:30, he came at 7:30. He looked at me, what's master? I said, you told me 6:30. 6:30, 7:30. I mean, first lesson, we don't take it that like you take it. Okay, lesson number one. And then I asked him what I need to do. I said, you have to come every Friday and Saturday. We're an Orthodox Jewish community. You have to prepare the food, set the tables, all the work that we cannot do. And so I did it. And he told me one thing, he warned me. The members of the Jewish community, of this tiny little community where they had the room, maybe a 16th of that, of here the synagogue is a prayer room with an Aron HaKodesh, with a bima. They don't like very much if a German goes in there because it's the little world that they have preserved. And indeed, when they came in, they were hickering and pickering, was macht der Goy dort? And Itzhak said, der alte Kackers. I didn't say that, he said it. These are alte Kackers, don't worry about it. Here beseder, everything will be fine. And so after I did my deeds, I literally squeezed myself in the corner of this little tiny stiebelech, and I absorbed the liturgy, the culture, the language, the mannerism, and the closer I came to this family of choice, the more I distanced myself from my family of origin. And unfortunately, or fortunately, or predictably, it came to a clash. And the biggest clash that came when Christmas fell on a Friday night. And Friday night, Christmas Eve, I had to be in temple. And I can play this movie, what happened on Friday night on Christmas Eve, like it happened yesterday. My mother took us as children to the church. We came back, we had symbolic food, lentil soup and carp. Then we listened to my father's ringing the bell, and that allowed us to go into the living room. In the living room, my father was standing next to the Christmas tree with real candles, finest dark suit, and the Knight's Cross around his neck. Now, I was not there. When I came back on Saturday, all hell broke loose, and he yelled and screamed. My mother was crying, where were you? What did you do? And I had it. That was a moment I had it. So look, I don't come to Christmas celebration to want to celebrate the birth of Christ when you have this blood-stained cross around your neck and you're a murderer. This is phony. To celebrate the birth of Christ, and on the other hand, you killed thousands. He looked at me, kein Problem, raus. Get out. There was a little problem. Ein kesef, no money. And even though I was in the second to last year of medical school and had a scholarship, there were some extra costs that I had to cover. And I never got any money from the community, nor did I ask, but Itzhak must have noticed, who was my quasi-father, must have noticed that something's wrong with me, and must have told others, find out what's wrong with him, whatever he asked him, because for the first time in my 5 years in this community, one member of this community approached me His name was Aaron, and looked at me and asked me and told me, look, you don't know. Your shoes, deine Schuhe und deine Jacke sind schmutzig. Your shoes and your jacket is dirty, which was not true. Kauf dir neue Sachen, buy new stuff. Gave me money, 100 mark, which was a huge amount of money at that time. So he insulted me, and then he gave me money, and I was confused. So I walked to Itzhak and said, Itzhak, Aaron gave me 100 mark. He gave you 100 mark? Normally he's kamtzan, he doesn't give you money, he's very stingy. So did you ask for 200 at least? I said, no. Because you don't know, you want to live with us, you need to know that. And he smiled. I said, what do you mean? I said, that's a joke. Sit down. You don't understand us yet. We have a different emotional background than you have. Many of us don't have emotions left. It took me many years to rebuild something like normal life. And I married a non-Jewish woman. She converted. I have a child. She helped me to be normal again. Aaron, we don't know anything about him. We know from the Red Cross he was in Auschwitz, and that's all. And he was in a DP camp. That's all. And Aaron actually started to talk with me. Every Friday, every Saturday, he started to tell me his story, bits and pieces. And he cried like a little girl, because he was a member of a Sonderkommando. I want to not burden you with the in Yom Hashoah what a Sonderkommando was, but just for those who need to know, it was a group of Jews who their job was to receive the Jews selected for gassing, calm them down, we are with you, we are like you, hang up your coats, and everything will be fine. You pick it up in the next room, herded them in the gas chambers, closed the door, Cyclone B was dropped from the top, they died, and when the screaming and the yelling and the banging stopped, they tore out the bodies, and with gas mask on, and tore out the gold teeth, burned the bodies, crushed the bones. And for that, they got 90 days reprieve of life, women, wine, whatever they wanted. And 90 days later, they were gassed, the next group came in. Aaron survived that. Unfortunately, Aaron died about 6 months later, or 7 months later. And we had to bury him. And I was in the university. And Itzhak called me and said, Bernd, you have to come immediately. Aaron died. We need to form a Chevra Kadisha. I said, what do you mean, Chevra Kadisha? I knew what it was. I cannot be part of the Chevra Kadisha. I'm not a Jew. You're one of us. So I prepared the body. We, together with the other members, we buried him the next day. And Itzhak just gave him the prayer book and said, say the Kaddish. And I knew that I had to do it because I was his only friend. And when I finished the Kaddish, I knew I stepped across the line. That was it. And I knew that for a while already, but that was the crossing over to the other side. And I told Itzhak, I want to become a Jew. Itzhak looked at me with his sad eyes, showed me the number tattooed again, and said, you want that? That is suffering. Be a ger tzedek, be a righteous person. You don't have to be a Jew. And I told him, look, I want to be. I said, look, if you're Michiganer, I know, but there is the rabbi in Frankfurt. I send you there. I pay the ticket. I pay for the hotel. You don't come back until he talks you out of it. And so the rabbi did, or tried. But we came to an agreement that he would teach me over the next 2 years. In return, I would not ask for conversion, which of course, I was a nutnik. Every time I met him, I'd asked him in the end, when is the time? And in March or April 1986, he gave up and said, Bernd, I refer your case to the rabbinical court. They will come together for the next session in December this year. Until you get there, and if I recommend you to be heard, you have to do something that you may not like. One involves a little plastic surgery. Don't want to talk about it, but it had to be done in an Orthodox facility, which we didn't have in Germany, and so I had to travel to Basel, Switzerland, in an Orthodox hospital, Jewish hospital. And a few months later, I had to travel to Metz in France, in a Haredi community, to immerse myself in a kosher mikveh. And with all the evidence that I had the prerequisite for conversion passed, I presented myself in November 1986 to the rabbinical court, and I remember this inquisition, I have to call it like that, like it happened yesterday. Because the rabbis didn't want to know about my knowledge. They knew I knew. Didn't want to know about my character. They had many character references. They wanted to know answer to one core question. Why on earth a German who has no connection to Judaism at all, before at least, wants to become a Jew? And I had to answer that. And I convinced them, and they retreated. The chief rabbi came back, and an hour later with the whole group, I had to stand up, and they were standing on the podium. The rabbi looked at me, and it was a very tense environment, and said, are you ready? And he read these Theodat Gyu, the conversion certificate in Hebrew and then in German. And it was literally a very tense atmosphere. And he noticed it and said, "No, do you know your name?" I said, "What do you mean?" "No, you have a last name called Ben Avraham now. You cannot change that. But the name, did you think about a name? What's your first name?" I said, "Bernd." "Do you know what Bernd means?" "No, it means the bear slayer. Dubi, Doba, Dov, the bear, you will Dov, take it, it's free. Dov Ben Avraham." And I was overwhelmed, and he asked me, "What do you want to do now?" He said, "The first thing I'm going to do is finish my medical exam, which is next week, and then I will emigrate to Israel." I said, "Why do you want to do that?" He said, I can't give money, I can't give anything. I want to serve in the army," which I did. I applied for the Sochnut, the Jewish agency, and the Israeli embassy in Germany. Within 30 days, I was recognized as Ole Chadash. My passport was stamped, my German passport. And on 7th of January 1987, I had a one-way ticket with El Al from Frankfurt to Tel Aviv. The night before, I tried to say goodbye to my parents. My mother was crying when she opened the door. My father refused to let me in, screaming from upstairs that the Verräter, the traitor, should get the hell out of here. And that's it. That's where I left and came to Israel. I remember the reception hall in the old airport, Olam Chadashim, Olam Shevishil Ole Chadashim, זה נקרא. And that was before. And the pakit, the bureaucrat, sat behind the board, totally bored. It was 10, 11 o'clock at night, and looked at me. "What do you want?" I said, "I have my papers for immigration." "Okay, did you think about where you're going? Kibbutz or Ulpan?" I said, "Well, I want to go to Ulpan Akiva." "Do you have money?" I said, "No." "Then you need to go to kibbutz." So I said, "Do you have money for the shirut?" I said, "I don't have money. I had 20 marks in my pocket." "Nah, we give you a free ticket to the kibbutz." I arrived in the kibbutz, stayed for 6 months, learned Hebrew and picked bananas during the day. If anybody has any question of bananas, I can answer them all. And 6 months later, I was assigned to a hospital in downtown Tel Aviv, Ichilov. There I did 1 year's internship, met my future wife, and a month after I finished the program and I gave up my German, actually wanted to have immediate Israeli citizenship, I was drafted into the military. I got basic training, officers training, and then I was assigned to my first post out in nearby Ramallah. That was called Beit El. That was the first year of the first Intifada. And I remember standing there with my uniform, clumsily holding my weapon, and I asked myself, that's not good. Because now people may ask me questions. And my commanding officer said, guys, this is your Rofeh, the Rofeh Gedudi. These are your soldiers, make it short. What his name? Wollschlaeger, I have to change that. Doctor, so-and-so, so that's it. And I asked myself, if they find out that I'm a Nazi in drag, I mean the uniform on, that I'm my father's son, they will not take that lightly. So I decided to throw my pass into a closet, throw the door, shut the door closed, lock the door with the key, and throw the key away. That was, of course, not a good idea. Because the only thing what people knew about me, that I'm from Germany, is true, that I'm a Jew is true, and I made Aliyah, that's true. But all the minor details are left out. And then years later, we were living in Miami, my son and later my daughter asked me questions. And I remember my son was that age a little bit of a clown. I have to say that, he laughs about it. He was about 15, 16 years old. He thought it's a cool story. I said, it's a cool story, but don't tell that at school, specifically not in a Jewish school, Hillel. But they had a family history day 3 weeks after I told them, or 4 weeks. And I was not there, but I was told years and years afterwards the story that my son raised his hand and proudly declared that my grandfather is a famous Nazi. Not good. I got called to the principal's office, and of course my wife didn't want to go. That was my story now. And they were concerned that my son had something screw loose or a little bit of puffing the dragon. And the rabbi looked at me and said, when I told the story, he said, did you ever talk about it? I said, no, you should. And for the first time, actually in his school, after I started talking about it, something happened. I knew that I had to close the circle of life. I had to move forward in my life and don't close this chapter, but trying to deal with this chapter of my life. And one of the ways to deal with it was to travel to Germany, which I did. several times afterwards. But on the first trip, I visited my parents' grave alone, and because they were long gone, the only place I could find them there was in the cemetery. And ironically, their gravesite, if you ever go to the Bamberg Cemetery, which is a very typical town with the German Jewish history or Jewish Christian history, where Jews are buried in the same plot like Christians are buried, but just separated from by a wall. That close were Jews and Christians living together. And my parents' grave is located exactly one row to the wall that separates the Jewish from the Christian cemetery. So when you look towards towards their grave, you see on the other side the Jewish gravestones almost defiantly casting the shadow to the side of my parents' grave. And I knew that if this is a sign for me, if you don't step out, and that's what I tell my children all the time, specifically when they accompanied me to the graveside, when you don't deal with the past will cast its shadow even in death. What I could do is to take the step out of the shadow, turn around, learn the lessons, and move forward. That never, with the lessons learned, it will happen again. And that's the responsibility of my generation, Germans, first and second generation, that we have to make everything happen that it doesn't happen again. And that's what I took, of course, to heart. And that's the reason why I'm talking. It's not about me. That's absolutely not about me at all. It's about that people can change, and that people shouldn't be judged to whom they belong to and what company they dwell in. I'm a German. Doesn't mean that all Germans are bad, because obviously, hopefully I'm not. Judge them by the individuals and not by the name or the group that they belong to. If you're Muslim and German or Christian, each of us has a capacity to change his or her life. That's what I try to convey specifically to children. Secondly, what I learned, and my father probably was not willing to teach me that, but indirectly he taught me that words have consequences. Words of hatred, if left unchallenged, will fall on a fertile ground, which is the mind of others. And there they sprout into deeds. And if these deeds left unchallenged, they will shape habits. If these habits prevail left unchallenged, then it will shape social norms by characters that carry those habits forward. And if these social norms prevail, that explains but never excuses that an entire people killed another people. Because everybody in Germany knew what happened. Everybody knew. That's a lie if somebody said we didn't hear anything, see anything, because it was the norm. That's what you did. In my hometown, Bamberg, where I did in the 70s some research about those surviving non-Jews, what they knew, I told them on Reichskristallnacht, Crystal Night, the pogrom night in November the 9th, 1938, the synagogue in Bamberg was burning, a big, huge church-like structure, like the dome that I learned to appreciate when I was a child. It was burning and they couldn't burn it down, so the fire department came and blew it up. You tell me that you didn't hear anything, smell anything, or heard anything. Nobody heard. Absolutely, it was impossible. Everybody heard, saw it. So that is important to understand, that everybody, and it's not a word against Germans. No Germans, no problem. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. That's a human character. Humans will look away when it's normal to look away, or participate when it's normal to participate in the murder of others. Secondly, what definitely can precipitate the Holocaust and any kind of mass murder and genocide, when you depersonalize people. Suddenly Jews were not persons. They were Abraham and Sarah. And then they de-individualized them. And then you demonized them. De-individualized them, depersonalized them, and then demonized them. Meaning they're dreck, they're vermin, they're just not worth living. That was normal in Germany. Absolutely normal. Even today, I hear that or heard that in Germany about gypsies. Gypsies are not people. Zigeuner, gypsies. Well, they need to be dealt with. I heard that when I was still growing up as a child. They were another culture, another people. Romanos. And lastly, everybody can change. The problem is what we do with the knowledge that we acquired. I'm continue talking about it, not because I know everything is fine. We all reached the level of nirvana. We go kumbaya and say everything is fine. Unfortunately, it's not, because out of this door, when you step in the world, you're suddenly the enemy again. An increase of 50 to 80% of hate crimes, specifically against Jews, perpetuated by white nationalists. That is because words of hatred are being used. And I'm not talking about Democrats or Republicans, a far cry from that. I'm talking about our society. When suddenly it's okay to say the word nationalism, which is wrong, nationalism always leads in the abyss. When suddenly it's okay that white Aryans march in the streets with torches in their hand and screaming, and Jews will not replace us, and they're nice people. They're not nice people. They're fascists, National Socialists. They want to kill you, and they did it in Pittsburgh, and they did it in San Diego, and they're going to do it over and over again unless we stop them. And the question is how we can stop them. The first thing you need to do after Yom HaShoah, speak up against words of hatred. Get engaged in fighting hatred. Protect your communities. Because it's not about violence that we fight violence with violence. We need to fight violence with words. We need to protect our communities, but we have to start the process of regrowing and rebirthing and recreating a better society. So hopefully this gave you some food for thought, and I really appreciate the opportunity that you allowed me to speak in this beautiful temple. And if you have any questions, please feel free asking me the questions, and thank you very much for allowing me to share.
We have time for maybe just a few questions, if anyone has any.
Hi, first of all, thank you for sharing your story
Thank you.
and being with us on this day. I have a million questions, actually, but when you sort of summon your feelings about your past and your childhood, and you initially said you were close with your father, and obviously, you then came to see him as the monster that he is. Is it binary? Are you just like, he was just such a horrible man, or do you ever sort of transcend into that world when you were a small child and you had close memories with him before you knew who he really was?
Thank you for the great question. First of all, everybody has only one father, and I don't hate him. I had to make closure in front of his gravesite because it was the only place I could find, even though he wrote in his will that I'm forbidden to attend his funeral, that I'm forbidden to come to the gravesite, that I'm expelled from the family. He is my father. I am him. And I forgave him for what he did to me, but I cannot forgive him for what he did to others. So I closed that chapter. I love my father as a child. I cannot suddenly unlove him. But he was a monster, not with me. He was a monster to others. So when you ask this nice little boy, German boy, how do you feel about his father's pain? That he didn't have the opportunity to be closer to him. There was only one. And this is very difficult to understand because I found out about him. He called me a traitor. He threw me out of the family, but he was my father. And that's what actually a good rabbi told me. He said, you need to make closure. And that's a way of closure. You cannot hate your parents.
Maybe just one more question, if there is.
Pardon me?
Did you have any siblings, or are you an only child?
No, it's a good question. We were three. I was the middle child. I had a sister who was 10 years older than I am, and she died in 2006. She was actually, her name was Krista. She was the one that, when I tried to get reunited with my family, she was the conduit to get reunited with the surviving members of the family. And from her I learned a lot about my family. And she unfortunately died 12 years ago. And I have a younger sister who still lives in Germany, and I started the process of reconnection, and successfully, I think so. We met personally. My daughter met her, my son met her, I met her children, and actually the children, after I gave a presentation in Germany and I was in the news, they called me the cool uncle. And they visit me on their own, like her daughter visited me in Miami with a boyfriend, and she loves me as her uncle. So I reunited with that part of the family.
I want to thank Dr.
I think there's one question right next to, if you allow me, there's what's next to her, the lady. And I can answer a question when I walk out, don't worry.
Did you consider staying in Israel?
Good question. Well, that's the story why you don't stay in Israel is as follows. After 7 years in Israel, actually after 6 years in Israel, I was in the army for 2 years and 19 months. And in May 1990, I was discharged from the active service and started my residency training. And then in August 1990, Saddam Hussein had this great idea to invade Kuwait. And we were mobilized because I was a physician. And I was trained in chemical warfare defense. I got in September I got my tzav that I had to go to a unit stationed on the border to Jordan and Egypt, Syria and Israel. And there were missile batteries on top, and the rest I don't want to tell what we did, but that was clear that when it happens, something bad will happen. The missiles attacks happened. I was in a rescue unit outside one night with my family and my wife. I fully respect her for that. She had it, and she said, "Look, I will go with our child I want to go back to the States." She chose Miami. It's not a bad place, I heard, because my mother-in-law, her mother lives there. And so I said, well, when you go there, do 3 years residency training, and afterwards I go back. That didn't work out like that. And so I'm an Israeli citizen living in the United States, go back to Israel once or twice a year, have relationships to the medical world in Israel. Just recently was there. And do a kind of try to do like a dual re-entry, living in the States and working a little bit in Israel and do some research. So I'm living here now in Miami, but I'm an Israeli citizen. And that's okay with me.
And that is all the time we have for questions right now, but I want to extend our gratitude again to Dr. Wollschlaeger. And as we bring this evening to a close, just a few announcements that the annual Westside Communal all-night vigil and reading of the names begins at 10 o'clock at the Karlbach Shul on 79th Street, and BJ's reading slot is from 1 a.m. to 1:30. Yes. 305 West 79th, it's between Broadway and Riverside? Between West End and Riverside. And in addition, readings will continue at the Marlene Meyerson JCC at 76th Street in Amsterdam from 9 a.m. until 6 p.m. tomorrow, and Kaddish will be recited there. Thank you for being with us tonight, and Erev Tov.